Hello, it's Mark from vanandboat.com. Welcome to my latest video, and this is the first in a series of videos explaining how I built the van. Throughout the project I have taken photographs, mainly so that I can refer back to them if I need to make any modifications in the future, but I'm also using those as the basis for these videos. In this video we'll be looking at the floor and exactly how I went about fitting that. But before we get started, when I bought the van it was 4 years old and had been used by an engineering company, and as such it was quite oily. So the very first stage in the project was to give the van a thorough clean. I started by removing all of the existing ply lining, both on the walls and the floors, and also there was a original factory fitted plastic lining behind the ply. So all of that came out. I then gave it a thorough clean using soap and water, and for more difficult areas white spirit, and once it was clean I then had an empty shell to start working on. I also took out the bulkhead behind the driver's seat because I wanted access into the cab, and also removed all of the front seats and gave the cab area a thorough clean too. Before putting the seats back in, I fitted a carpet in the cab area. I needed to use the van as it was my only vehicle, so I had to get it in a usable state quite quickly. Now I could concentrate on the floor, I decided to use 12mm ply, which would give a solid base to walk on, and I was confident that wouldn't flex. Because I was intending on using the van during the winter, I wanted to make sure that it was well insulated, and I decided to use 25mm Extra Therm or Celotex, or various different brand names for the solid insulation board. In order to have something to support the floor, I then decided to use 25mm pine batten as a frame. In an effort to try and prevent the floor squeaking, I bedded each of the battens on a bead of silicone sealant to isolate the wood from the steelwork. I then pre-drilled the wood and screwed the wood down using stainless steel screws, and I also dipped them in the sealant just to try and waterproof any holes through the floor. When I was doing this I kept checking underneath that I was clear of all the brake pipes and the spare wheel. You'll notice in the photograph that I put a much thicker piece of timber by the door. This was to give a solid step for climbing in and out of the van. Once the frame was finished it was time to put the insulation in. I cut the insulation board using a sharp bread knife, and I cut it so that there was a 10mm gap around the insulation. This was in an effort to prevent the insulation squeaking as the van moved. Once the insulation was cut to size, I then bedded it on a layer of silicone sealant and allowed to dry. My next stage was to fill the gaps around the insulation board using expanding foam. But before I did this, I wanted to temporarily hold all of the insulation in place to prevent the foam from lifting the boards. My method was simply to put some extra battens over the top of the board with a couple of screws just to hold it in place. I then used expanding foam to fill all of the gaps around the foam and allowed this to dry overnight. The following day I then got a sharp knife, again the bread knife, and cut all of the foam flush with the insulation. Now I had a fully insulated floor, it was almost time to fit the ply. However, before I did this I decided to draw out carefully the position of all the battens, and then using a tape measure recalled all of those dimensions. I also laid the tape measure across the battens and took photographs as a quick and easy visual reference. Fitting the ply was very straightforward. I measured it to size and cut it using a panel saw. Once it was all cut to size, I fixed the ply to the timber battens using 1.5" screws. I made sure these were countersunk so that it wouldn't damage the surface or the carpet, which I would fit later. I'm very happy with how the floor turned out. It's a very strong, solid base, and when I've built the cupboards later on, it gave a really solid surface to fix to. I hope that you found this video useful. If you did, please subscribe, because there'll be lots more videos explaining exactly how I built the van. Please also click the like button. There's a bit more information about the build on my website, vanandboat.com, And if you've got any suggestions for future videos, please leave a comment below. Thank you very much.